What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. For tonight's episode, I wanted to talk a bit about how vendors or operators would modify the Bally Bingos in order to make them less profitable for the players, shall we say. The issue is that certain Bally Bingos would offer very high payout features or would offer features which would allow repositioning of the numbers, which were functions which could be manipulated in the player's favor. Another example would be machines where the game would automatically spot a particular number. Well, the issue with all this is that all this player friendliness means that the game is paying out more. You don't have to rely 100% on the player's skill in order to get a payout. And so what the operators would do, either themselves or they would hire a technician to come and modify the machine so that you could still play it, but that feature would never come up. In some instances, they would even go as far as scraping it off the back glass and recoloring it somehow, usually poorly. But those were the most extreme cases. Normally, what would happen is that you would see the item on the back glass, but it would just never light. So, how did they accomplish this? Well, the easiest thing to do is to figure out exactly what triggers that. Is it a trip relay? Simply cut a lead to the coil, and it will never trip. You have to be careful not to cut the common, but you cut the power lead. That's a relatively simple fix. Let's take the example of my ticker tape. This is a 6-card game which will randomly award a feature called Superlines. The Superline is one of the 5 horizontal rows which make up a bingo card, of which there are 6 on this game. It's a 6-card game. When the feature is lit, if you get 3 balls in that horizontal row, it scores as if you've got 4 balls. If you get 4 in that horizontal row, it scores as if you have 5. Another feature this game has is corners. If you get balls in all 4 corners, it scores as 5 in a line when that feature is lit. Now the game will randomly award this. And it does this based on the position of a disc called the randomizer. When the machine is first turned on and a coin is inserted, the randomizer starts turning. It's turned via a motor. As it turns, depending on the position of the fingers on the wiper disc, on the large contact plate on the back of this motor, as a coin is dropped in, it will either award or not. And the vast majority of the time it does not. Now this game, when I picked it up, had a hack where a technician had cut some of the traces on this disc. And they did this so that there were even fewer points of conductivity in the disc, so that essentially there was one position that would award you one of those features. Now the chances of you hitting that one position are pretty small. So one of the first things I did to that game was to repair that disc. Another example would be on a game such as Nightclub. Nightclub has a feature called the Bally Hole. The Bally Hole was the number 16, which is the hardest number to hit on the bingo playfield. It's pretty much in the center. Well, in games with the Bally Hole feature, the game would automatically award you something. In this case, Nightclub's case, it will award an extra ball. So as soon as you land a ball in the number 16, the game has already lit first extra ball and will auto lift that ball as soon as you've shot your fifth one. Pretty cool. But maybe that's a little too player friendly. So what you would do is trace out the circuit and figure what awards that. I've never seen a situation where someone cut an under playfield wire. In this case, in Nightclub's case, with the Bally Hole, there's a second switch in that number 16. And one thing you could do is cut the wire that's going to that, or you could figure out where it's going to the Jones plug and then cut it out of there. Or you go further into the game and figure out where it's going, where that signal goes to, and then stop it. Now, there's plenty of situations that I've seen where an operator has made the game more difficult to award a feature or an odds jump, and that's by disconnecting some of the wires on the spotting disc. The more connections you have in general in a Bally Bingo on either a Jones plug or on the spotting disc, the more likely it is that you'll be awarded something. By default, most of the connections on the spotting disc are connected. In order to make the game more difficult, a skilled technician can disable certain spots on the spotting disc, which will still allow the game to play as intended, except that it becomes more difficult to achieve those certain special features. So maybe instead of putting in 5 nickels to light the magic screen, you have to put in 15 or 20. It's a situation that's very similar to that randomizer disc that I was talking about on the 6-card games. These are just some examples, and there are many, many more. Some operators would rather that you play straight up bingo rather than have any of the features which provided some of the intriguing gameplay on these games. So when you're evaluating a bingo, especially if it's one that's billed as fully working, you should attempt to review each of the features of the game and see if they work. If it's a magic screen game, can you move the screen? Does the time tree actually do something properly? Can you get a payout with 3 in the blue? How about 2 in the blue? Now, if the game is a project, then you're going to have to figure out what the hack was and reverse it. Sometimes this can be very difficult. There were a lot of skilled technicians that worked on these Bally Bingos. A lot of folks that knew the wiring inside and out. And it's hard to come behind someone like that because they knew what they were doing. They didn't do something as obvious as just cutting a wire to the playfield. It typically involved much, much more than that. So that's just something to be aware of if you pick up one of these games. If you never see a feature light, it's possibly because the game has been modified to award it very infrequently or never. However, there are certain features which are only awarded very rarely, even in a fully working game. So it can be hard to know, especially if you've never played a bingo, if the behavior is appropriate or a hack. In those cases, it's probably best to ask someone. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. Feel free to call or email with questions about your bingo, and I'll be happy to attempt to answer. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to me on my website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.